Here is a question for you. Has your Christian life become too convenient? Let's talk about it in this week's Sunday School lesson. Our lesson this week is David's sacrifice. I know that's not a popular word these days. The lesson focus, give God the sacrifice he deserves. The lesson scripture is 1 Chronicles 21:14 through 30. Thank you for coming back to Points to Ponder, where we discuss this week's Sunday school lesson. And I tell you, every week I get excited about doing this because I learn something new about God, and I get to give you great discussion questions that you can ask in your class. Because good questions lead to good discussion, that leads builds a great community. And that's what we want to do, because we all want to be transformed into who God has called and conditioned and commanded us to be. So where do our questions come from? Three ways we find our questions: emotions in the text, decisions in the text, and responses in the text. And we're going to see all three just right at the beginning. So let's jump right on into our first outline. God sends a plague. Ooh, listen what it says. Listen, verse 14. So the Lord sent a plague on Israel, and 70,000 men of Israel fell dead. Pause. I gotta stop right there. Listen, here's my first point to ponder. Listen what it says. How do you explain when bad comes from God? Many people in the world always wonder, how did this kid get cancer? How did this happen? Is it because of sin? Did they do something wrong? Even in the New Testament, we see the same thing with the disciples. And it's hard a lot of times for us to verbalize when we know the character of God. We're going to get to that in just a second. But how would you answer that question? How do you explain bad from God? Isn't that a good question? How do you explain bad from God when somebody approaches you? Let's keep going. Verse 15. And God sent an angel to destroy Jerusalem. But as the angel was doing so, the Lord saw it and relented concerning the disaster, and said to the angel who was destroying the people, enough, withdraw your hand. Listen, verse 15. Here's our second point to ponder. Listen what it says. What can we learn about God's character even in the midst of our own sin? Wow. What do we see in that verse about God's character in the midst of our sin, in the midst of our wrong? Wow, because it says here, he saw it, he relented and said enough. Ain't that love? I'm telling you, every time I read the Bible, I fall more and more in love with God, because that shows that, man, listen, God, even when I was completely wrong, he saw it and said, that's enough punishment. And his love still shined through. Wow. That's a response in the text to God. Now listen, let me go forward. I'm going to skip down to verse 17. We're still in the first outline. David said to God, was it not I who ordered the fighting men to be counted? I, the shepherd, have sinned and done wrong. These are but sheep. What have they done? Lord my God, let your hand fall on me and my family, but do not let this plague remain on your people. Here's point to ponder number three. And it just deals with probably pride, arrogance, and things of that nature. But here's point to ponder number three. Why is it so hard for people in leadership to admit their mistakes? Why is it so hard when you're the leader, when you're the president, when you're the chairperson, when you're the CEO? Why is it so hard seemingly in people in those positions to admit they're wrong and to own it? Notice what David did. David said, it's not the sheep, it's the shepherd. Wow. That's you talking about a man after God's own heart. He said, it's not the sheep, it's the shepherd. But point to ponder, I want you to think about, why is it so hard for leadership to admit we're wrong? I'm going to add a little bit to that. I'm going to add a little bit to it right now for your discussion. And as followers, how can we make it easier for leaders to be transparent? Wow. And as followers, how can we make it easier for leaders to be transparent? Wow. Let's go to that second outline. It's so much here. It says David's offering. And I'm going to skip to verse 24. So verse 24 for point to ponder number 4. And listen what it says. But King David said to Araunah, no, I insist on paying full price. Let me give you some background. Because Arona was going to just donate the field where David can build an altar. He was like, don't pay anything. I'll make sure I'll provide the sacrifice, everything. David says, no, I insist on paying full price. I will not take for the Lord what is yours or sacrifice a burnt offering that cost me nothing. Ooh, here's our point to ponder number 4. Here's our reflective question. In many circles, has Christianity become too convenient? That everything has to be worked according to our schedule. We are merciful when we want to. We give when we want to. We show up when we want to. We go to church when we want to. David says, I'm not going to offer God anything that costs me nothing. My God. He said, I'm not going to offer God anything that costs me nothing. And I want you to think about, what's the problem with free? Has our Christianity in some circles become too convenient? Wow. Listen what it says. Listen what it says in verse 26. David built an altar to the Lord there and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. He called on the Lord, and the Lord answered him. So I'm gonna give you point to ponder number 5. Here you go. What's attractive about sacrifice to God? What about sacrifice is attractive to God? Does it show that high level of commitment? Does it show pure desire? Does it show us laying ourselves down, my Lord in heaven? What about sacrifice is attractive to God? Because we see that narrative all the way through the text. Now, let me go to this last outline. Wow, this is a great lesson. God forgives. And I'm just going to hit verse 30 real quick. God forgives. Listen what it says. But David could not go before it to inquire of God. And he's talking about going into the tabernacle because he was afraid of the sword of the angel of the Lord. Here's point to ponder number 6. Why is it important? This is the application question kind of. Why is it important for believers to keep a healthy fear of God? Why is it important for believers to always keep a healthy fear of God? Because I believe he's more than just the man upstairs, that he's more than my big daddy. No. Why do we need to keep a healthy fear of God? David said, I know you forgave me, but I need to fear you. Wow, I know you love me, but I still need to keep a healthy fear, keep a healthy reverence. Wow, those are just 6 points to ponder that I thought of. Use these questions in your discussion and really talk about them. Dig into them. As a teacher, if you're teaching this 40-50% of the time, you want to talk, but let them discuss the word, because that's where the growth comes. And if you're doing this personally, write your answers down. Discuss it with a friend and see what God will do. Have a great day. See you next week. Talk to you later. Bye.